Boundary is a clear, conscious limit that protects your well-being. It
Okay.
defines what's okay and what's not in relationships and daily life.
What about the country? I mean, this is a
Exactly.
big British conversation right now. Like, whose country is Britain?
Women, I think, particularly, many have developed a pattern of saying yes
Yeah.
before they've developed the awareness.
Don't underestimate how good at masking people pleasers are.
And the art of a graceful no is also not over explaining as well.
If people think that no is always hateful and they're good people, they just won't ever do it. Okay, on the show today, me. Also, my good colleague, Helen, Dr. Helen, who I teach courses with on nervous system health and meaning. We have a membership together that we really enjoy. She's the yin to my yang. And realized doing a few podcasts where rather than talking to guests, it's always nice to, record some content, say what we're sharing about. Today's topic is boundaries. Helen, you up for exploring boundaries?
Absolutely. I think it's a really good thing to explore.
I
Yeah.
think it's super useful. Why are we doing this? One, it is one of the most popular topics for coaching. I'd say nearly 50% of my coaching boundaries comes up, particularly with women, particularly with certain cultures, Slovenians, English alike. It's a big one when we look at resilience and burnout. When we look at trauma, it's definitely an issue. In terms of life purpose, people can't do that without boundaries. So yeah, it's a big one. Second one, by the time you hear this, we're doing a little boundaries event live online, just kind of aligning it with that. So yeah, have a look at embodimentunlimited.com. We'll be doing a few free sessions on boundaries. It's probably over the next few days by the time this comes out. So that's where we thought we'd go into it. So where to begin, Helen?
Where to begin? Well, what's a boundary? I guess that's the first thing.
That
What?
is a good question. And I asked Helen, as well as being a qualified psychiatrist, yoga teacher, yoga nidra teacher, by the way, the Ukrainians say thank you for the yoga nidra session you did with them the other day online. They all fell asleep. They
Pleasure.
loved it. They needed some deep rest, and I think they got it. As well as being all those things, Helen is a little bit of an AI. I wouldn't say expert, but it's certainly you're pretty competent with it, aren't you? You put us kids to shame.
Well, I like investigating. I mean, it's not going away, is it? So I wanted to explore
We should
AI.
do make a note, Helen. Let's do a session on AI on one of these because I was just thinking, I was saying to my coaches today, I'm training on CAC, that's our main course. Like, what can you do that AI can't? Because if you don't have a good answer to that, you ain't got a job pretty soon. It's that simple, isn't it? But no, but one of the things we do is when we have conversations is we ask ChatGPT like what is boundaries, and I have my version, you have your version, and it's not because it's gospel. Sometimes people treat AI like it knows the truth. It doesn't. It just takes things from the internet, but it can be a useful starting point. So, what is a boundary? The ability to say no. That's an embodied thing, obviously. It's not just about saying the word. Um, what is a boundary not? Now, what does AI say? What is a boundary actually? Let's hear the Helen version and then the AI version.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll give you the AI version because the first thing that actually came to my mind when I thought about the word boundary was like a field and a fence and being
Okay.
in nature and, the edge of a forest, from a forest to a field or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
ChatGPT didn't say that, of course, but I did
I
say to
liked your
Chat,
pagan version. I did see
yeah,
a thing the other day of a pack of wolves, and it showed how different packs of wolves in Yellowstone would be in a very clear area. So sometimes hippies have this idea that like there's no boundaries in nature, and that's absolutely not the case. Like animals have their territory, for example, right?
yeah, yeah. And plants and animals invade boundaries as well.
Right,
Get
right. That's the thing. Across the boundaries.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what did our AI overlord say?
A boundary is a clear, conscious limit that protects your well-being. It
Okay,
defines what's okay and what's not in relationships and daily life.
interesting. A clear, conscious limit. All right. So related to well-being, we're going to come back to that.
Mhm.
I think, we've found coaching many, many people that's absolutely true. What was the next part?
It defines what's okay and what's not in
Okay.
relationships
All right. So
and daily life.
this I think is problematic, as the liberals say. Why is it problematic? Because people have misunderstood, like everything's hashtag boundaries now. And
Yeah.
I've noticed this is becoming a way of actually demanding things or a way of requesting things or a way of not having a conversation. It's become many, many things. So for me, you can only have a boundary around something that's yours, right? Or else it's not a boundary, it's a demand. So what does that mean? So for example, you can be totally boundaried around the following things. Your body. Your body is under all circumstances, with very few exceptions, and vaccination isn't one of them. Your body is yours. Your body is up to you. I do not get to put my finger in your ear, Helen, without your permission. Okay. And this is
Good.
one of the basics of, yeah, okay. And I would never do that. It's actually defined, or one of the defining features of Western ethics. And this is incredibly important that and this is why, for example, the abortion debate is a very difficult debate because we're not quite sure if that's someone else's body, but it's in someone's body. So it really confuses us.
Yeah.
And whatever your opinion on that debate, I think we all see that it's a tricky one. It's a difficult one because, I mean, people say, I definitely know this is the case. It's like, well, hang on. If we're being honest, it's a conversation. It's
Yeah.
why, jokes aside, vaccination is also a conversation because it's like, well, it's definitely my body, right? You don't get to put something in my body without me asking, without me agreeing, but it might also affect other people, right? So at
Yeah.
what point do I say, well, that's actually a group concern? And the opposite end of the spectrum would be like, for example, Chinese culture, which sees things more communally. So the individual body is less important. So that might not sound like a big deal until you start hearing about like organ harvesting, right? Like in
Yeah.
the Chinese culture, it's understandable morally if you say, well, the group needs your organs. So bad luck, right? They don't have this emphasis of the individual sacredness of the human body, right? As embodiment people, I think we should be defending that the body as a sacred boundary, and obviously that includes sexual consent, right? Like an absolutely
Yeah.
vital thing that no one gets to violate anyone else's body, man, woman, child, other, without permission. So, if we're talking about boundaries in the sense of like bodily integrity, 100% with that as a definition, like that's got to be there.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, the physical boundary, so you're there talking about the physical boundary of the body. And you could extend the boundaries of the physical boundary of your room, your home,
Right, what
your
what belongs to you, right? Like we have a
yeah,
concept called ownership in the
yeah,
West. And in like American Constitution, this is like sacredly protect like property rights. Um, that not only do you have a body, but there's other stuff that you have effectively bodily rights over. So
yes,
I can't just walk into your house. You effectively have the same rights over your house as you do over your body. So it's like the extended body, right? And this has to be something that you unequivocally own, that is yours.
yes,
I mean, even this concept of ownership, which obviously, the Marxists don't like, right? Like what is, some people say, tribal people don't have this concept. They bloody do in almost every case. It might be a much more generous culture. Like I've certainly lived in African cultures where people were generous, but they were still clear, like whose stuff was whose stuff. That we have rights over our things. And society, as we understand it, doesn't really work unless, why would I work to get a house if someone can just take it from me, right? It's why communism
yeah,
never
yeah,
quite worked because if someone just turns up with a gun and demands your stuff, that's either communism or kind of anarchy, and neither of those we like. Like in the 90s, for example, in Russia, they swapped communism for kind of gangsterism, and people hated it because you work hard, you start a business, and the guy with a gun would just come to your house. This happened to my ex-wife, her family. It happened in
yeah.
Ukraine. People just turned up and said, "This is ours now." And again, life is almost unbearable if someone can just take stuff from you.
But also that boundary outside of the body becomes less firm. So to the
Right.
front door is quite rigid. To the end of the drive, if you have a drive, you
Yes.
don't expect the postman to ask every time he steps on the drive.
Right, right, right,
Yeah,
right. And what about the country? I mean, this is a
exactly.
big British conversation right now. Like, whose country is Britain? Is it, for example, we acknowledge that tribal people have a right to their land, and we say colonization is a bad thing because of that. But the UN said that there's no indigenous people in the United Kingdom, which actually, well, people who have been here, which by the way, it's not me. I'm Irish, right? I now live in Slovenia, but it's like, I find that bizarre that people have lived somewhere for 1,000 years, or in Japan, it might be 2,000 years. It's a very old country, Japan. It would be bizarre if we said that the Japanese didn't have some rights over the extended body of their country that, someone from, I don't know, Peru. I'm just using countries that are kind of
Yeah,
random
yeah,
here, right? Like we would find it bizarre that someone Peru is just as Japanese as a Japanese person. Yet we're told to believe this now. We're told to believe that someone arriving, and maybe they're, Ukrainian refugee, maybe they're whatever, they're suffering, and they're someone from Afghanistan, they really need help. But the idea that they have, that there's no boundary, that all borders are bad. I mean, there's a word in nature for things without borders, and it's cancer, right? Like no boundaries is a terrible, like in the body. Like you're a doctor, right? We're absolutely
yeah.
full about cellular membranes,
Yes.
boundaries between organs. Like talk about that biological side of it.
Well, the body is one thing, but you see that in nature outside of the body as well. Our
Yeah.
pond gets full of pondweed and nothing else will grow if I don't reduce the pondweed. In the body, if cells take over without boundary, it's anarchy, body anarchy, and ultimate death.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not boundaries bad, right? Like we understand, I think psychologically the boundaries are good. Biologically, boundaries are good, whether it be the territory of a wolf or the cells in your body. And we also understand you can be over boundaried, like a cell membrane lets things in and out. And I kind of feel
Yes.
like the same way about nations. You need a certain amount of married, not marrying your cousins, right? You need a certain amount. Like I've always thought, like migration by marriage was a really good thing because it's like, okay, that person's bringing some fresh genetics. They're, going to integrate in the culture. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like a little bit of fresh blood is a bit of fresh water in the pond is a good thing, right? So you could be, and it tends to be the liberals are under boundary and the conservatives are over boundary politically. It almost defines the political left and right. Like liberals will say, let everyone in the country, or, hey, just do what you want to do, or it's like free love, just, hey, everyone just fuck who you want to fuck. And conservatives are overbounded. They're like, let no one in the country, and things have always been this way in the organization, and don't have sex until you're married under any circumstances. There's very, very tight boundaries. So I think this is an interesting definition of if someone said like far right or far left, far is a value judgment. Okay, so it means too much left or too much right. So to me, too much means over or under boundaried.
Yes.
Like far left should be defined as under boundaried and far right as over boundaried. I think we have a embodied sense of what that's like. Like if you see someone who's over boundary, they're sort of tight, they're rigid, they got a
Yeah.
stick in their ass, they're like everything's a no. I was just in a hotel, and whenever I asked them, they're like, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. No, 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 no." And I was like, "I'm just asking for a flip chart. I've hired a room. I know you've got a flip chart. I saw it in the cupboard. Like I'll bring it up myself. I'll use my own pens." And eventually they allowed me to have this flip chart, and I was like, "Oh my God, that was hard work." But there was a
Yeah.
felt sense in the body of the hotel staff that they were over boundaried. And I've definitely been to hippie love fests that felt like this isn't love. Like, here's the mistake people make. They think under boundary is love.
Yes.
And to me, that's bizarre. Self-love is
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
self-love is doing whatever you feel like. Okay, well, I'm an alcoholic. What I feel like is taking drugs and alcohol and ruining my life. Is that a good idea? No, Mark, that's not a good idea. It's good that you have some like my parents are quite liberal and I learned boundaries the hard way, Helen. I learned boundaries. Like, I used to swear at my mum and my friends would be like, "Oh my God." They were like, even like my like liberal friends were like outraged, They're like, "How dare you? Like you get away with that?" And I did.
Yeah.
And then later in life, I didn't get away with it. And I learned boundaries through martial arts. It was like the embodied practice of boundaries. And we'll come to this, right? Like the embodied practice of boundaries, which it was not enough for me to theoretically understand that boundaries are important. I had to get it in my body. And martial arts are a great way to do that.
Because boundaries bring a structure, don't they? They bring a structure and they bring order. And what you're talking about is too much order, too little order, and finding that middle
It's
ground.
order and chaos, right? There's too
Yeah,
much order is prison, too much chaos is
yeah,
anarchy, right? There's a middle
yeah,
ground.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's difficult to self-assess that because in perception is embodied. And we know this from many other topics. Like I was just teaching a course today on the coaching course. And one of the things I say is like all embodiments are self-justifying and self-perpetuating. Right? Like this is people should be taking notes at home. This is gold. Okay, you should be paying me for this. Like what it is like whatever you are embodied, you just your brain goes, okay, how can I just we tend to think we think logically, but we don't. Most of our thinking is simply a way of justifying our own bullshit. right? Whether that's being overly boundaried, and then you say, well, should be the case in tradition, or under boundaried. Okay, so boundaries apply to our bodies, yes, to our spaces, but maybe with these liminal spaces like hallways and driveways, the place you take off
Yeah.
your shoes, the corridor, the reception area in a business.
Yeah.
There's these sort of liminal spaces that are sort of where boundaries are met. And we find those places interesting, like borders and boundaries, right? And then it's like what we own. And then another one I think people underestimate is time.
Yeah.
So this is what a lot of my clients don't realize, like your time is your business. Right? Like your time is your business. Like you don't get to take my time. And you've seen what I'm like if people send me 4-minute voice notes.
I have.
They generally don't twice. Because like if I send someone a 4-minute voice note, I'm saying I demand your time. Right?
Yeah.
I demand your time. I'm like, no, you don't get to take my time. That's mine. Right? If someone wants to speak to me, I remember once I would talk to when I was young. I'd stop a girl maybe in the street in the park and try and talk to her, and then she didn't want to talk to me. I just had to accept. You know what? She doesn't. I don't have a right to talk to her. This is her time. Maybe she's not in the mood. Maybe she just doesn't like me. Maybe she's boyfriend. Maybe she's gay. Maybe I don't fucking ever know why. And I don't have to know why. And she doesn't have to justify it. Now, I think maybe the sort of exception there, I'd say, is like civility. I remember trying to talk to Russian girls in Moscow and they just ignore me and walk around me. And I'd say, okay, you could acknowledge my existence. Like someone was just trying to sell me the Slovenian equivalent of the big issue. I don't owe him my time, but I think I owe him a certain amount of civility, let's say, and just to say no,
Yeah.
thank you, right?
Yeah. What is the boundary, why it matters, and how it's managed? How the
Right,
boundary is managed.
right. So this is where we get to the over and under. One of the things I do in body coaching with is a scale of no. Yeah, so the first insight is that cognitively knowing to say no isn't enough. If people can't embody a no, then they can't do it. Yeah, and often the reason they won't do no is because they only have a very hard no. So I'll do it's like, no, thank you. No, definitely not. And eventually we get onto the fabled fuck you warrior pose that we use from embodiment, which is like actually having a really fierce boundary. But what I notice is sometimes people swing, they go from no boundaries to over boundaried. There's like a sort
Yeah.
of pendulum kind of effect. And I mean, the sort of the aggressive feminist is the classic here, right? And it's someone who maybe has been hurt by having their boundaries violated. And one definition of trauma actually is having being under or over boundaried is either someone who's stuck in yes and they're a people pleaser, they're super
Yeah.
agreeable, or and for some reason now that's a popular topic. Like I wrote a book on people pleasing. It's easier to admit than the alternative because the alternative is basically you're a bit of a bitch. You're a bit of an asshole, right? The alternative is I'm a bit harsh with people. Like I tell people to go fuck themselves when I could just say no, thank you, right? Like that's the other that problem exists, and people don't want to sign up for that course. I notice because it's much harder to admit to.
Yeah. People readily admit to being a people pleaser, but that's without really understanding what's under being a people pleaser, isn't it?
What's under it? I mean, I wrote a book on it, but let's hear your take. What's under it? What's under it?
Manipulation, and lack of authenticity. Those are things, the qualities that people tend not to aspire to.
Yeah, no one would say I like to manipulate people with fake kindness, right? Like, where they say I'm a people pleaser. And it's way better PR. Actually, I spoke to someone in publishing and he said there's the secret to a good book in personal growth is to take something that a lot of people do and make it sound good and tell people it's not their fault, right? My friend of mine, actually, Alex, if you're out there, I'm taking the piss out of you. He literally wrote a book called "It's Not Your Fault," and I always say it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So it's like actually taking responsibility for your own boundaries. And I give you an example of this. Like, didn't when I was younger, I was used to feisty Irish women who would just tell you to bugger off if they didn't want something. And I just assumed all women were like that. So when I started dating, I didn't realize like most English women are like super agreeable. And you can say this comes from trauma or patriarchy or whatever. They would pretend things were okay. And then later on, I'd get a text message from them or their friend would tell me and say, hey, why did you do that? Or what? I was like, what? I didn't know there was a problem. And one thing, if you're disagreeable like me, is don't underestimate how good at masking people pleasers are. Like, don't
Yes.
underestimate how good at pretending everything's fine is for people who, and sympathetically may have had traumatic experiences. They may have had societal conditioning, gender conditioning, But I was shook because like people in my family aren't like that. Like my sister will tell you to bugger off if you know, if you do something she doesn't like. So I was like absolutely shocked when I realized there was a whole group of people who not only couldn't say no, but hid the fact, hid it, and maybe even didn't know themselves. Because actually, we tend to think of the skill of boundaries as
Yes.
saying no, but there's a previous skill. I actually say there's two skills. The first skill is noticing when something's not okay.
Yes.
And the second skill is saying no. And it's like, and their first skill is an awareness skill. It's a body awareness skill. So if people are numb, dissociated, they don't always have it. Like, and like notice when there's that. You'll hear people now say, "I don't feel comfortable with that," which I fucking hate. What does that mean? Okay, if it means no, thank you, that's totally fine. But it's like again, boundary has to be about you. Like someone said to me, "I'm not comfortable with what you're saying." I'm like, "Cool, you're not saying it. Don't worry about it." Like, I don't care. Like, you're not comfortable with it, right? Right. Oh, but are we talk? This is where boundaries has to be about you. Like, this is where I hear some people say that's my boundary, but they're really asking you to do something. This is a bit like human rights. If somebody says you have a human right to food, that sounds good, right? That sounds reasonable. Because somebody has to grow the food. Someone has to provide the food. So you can only have a human right from something like from violence, from attack, from theft. You have a human right to your food, to not have your food stolen, right? Because that's yours.
Yeah.
But you can't have a human right for housing because someone's got to build the bloody house. So it's just this sort of flip side of the coin. You can't say, well, that's my boundary, so you have to do it. No, I fucking don't.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
business, what I do. Now, the only time my business becomes your business is if I'm taking your stuff, violating your body. I can't touch you. I can't steal from you. I can't hurt from you. Because it almost defines liberalism in the best possible sense of our ethical system is defined by this, right? Like your rights ended my body.
Yes.
Right? You have no rights over
Yes.
my body, over my time, over my stuff. Right. And that's why like full libertarians, they dislike taxation because that's taking your stuff. That's all it is, right? It's like someone forcing you to give your stuff up. So yeah, I think this is the interesting debate. And certainly like this is why we're boundaries. I'd always ask, are we actually talking about a boundary or do you want something from me? Because that's different.
Yeah, different relationships to boundaries. As you're talking there, I'm thinking that many and women, I think, particularly, have many have developed a pattern of saying yes
Yeah.
before they've developed the awareness.
What's
So
the
no
default pattern,
awareness.
right? What's
Yeah,
the default? Is
just
it default no, like the hotel staff, or is it the
yeah,
default yes, which
yeah,
is pretty gendered? Why do you think? I mean, you tell me better than me, but I've known certain cultures do that more than others, for sure. I was in Bali, for example. It's super agreeable. Have to be careful with my Indian employees because they'll say yes even when they don't have capacity for something. Yeah. I mean, this is the issue with boundaries. Like, if we don't have boundaries, we get exhausted, we get resentful. That's the other big
yeah,
cost. Probably should have talked about this earlier, but if you don't have boundaries, what happens? It's like, here's another one. Ethically, you allow violation. So I would
yes,
say not having boundaries is an ethical problem, right? Like when the girl says, "Oh, you tried to kiss me and I didn't want that," I'm like, "Hang on a minute, I had no idea." Like who's responsible here? Well, you could say me for not being calibrated, and there's some truth in that. We can't just grab people or whatever, right? But it's like it's also up for the other person to say something, and I worry for young guys, for example, dating today. I mean, luckily I don't have this issue anymore, but I worry for young guys because it's like if all it takes for something to be a boundary violation is for something to be attempted and not wanted, well, I have no idea, right? Like if I tried to kiss my girlfriend and she says, I didn't want that, is that a boundary violation?
yeah.
Surely there must be some communication of the boundary, right? I mean,
Yeah, and
within limits.
the relationship matters, doesn't it? The relationship matters. I know that I have a ready no for somebody on the doorstep that rings the doorbell and wants to sell me something. My
Right,
no
right,
is
right.
there before I've even heard what they're
Before,
selling.
and no one
Yeah,
likes to be treated as an object, whether it's being
yeah,
sold to or in intimacy terms. Like this idea of you can feel it, right? Like you can
yeah,
feel if a salesperson just wants to get something from you or a creepy person on a date. It
yeah,
doesn't feel good. And the boundary, I think, rightly comes up at that point.
yes.
Yeah.
And it comes up in the body, doesn't it? It comes up in the body. it arises immediately.
So you were saying a lot of women particularly have a kind of a default yes. Does that mean they don't feel that? Just because the good side of I feel uncomfortable is like, okay, great. So do you want to say no to something? Or, are you just demanding something of me, which maybe isn't so okay, right? Like if someone's in my workshop said, I feel uncomfortable with you saying that. I was like, okay, I don't care. Like be uncomfortable. I'm saying a thing. It's my workshop, like I'm not abusing you. Like, is it that people are missing that signaling?
I don't think they're not feeling it, but I think the awareness of it has been calibrated down for whatever reason. So tuning back into the awareness
Mhm.
of what the body's telling you, me, whoever,
It's normally
to
like a fight
notice.
flight response, right? It's
Yeah.
like some kind of tension in there that's going,
Yeah.
okay. And then the next skill is then doing something about it. Because we
Yes.
can't always rely on other people to read it,
No.
right? Like
No.
we can't, or like children, for example, are horrible at recognizing other people's boundaries. They're horrible. Little kids just abuse the shit out of their mums, and the mums clearly like, get away from me. The little kid is just, and it's not that the kids are psychopaths or something, right? It's just that they haven't learned that skill of being able to recognize it in other people. Like, if anything, I think as we're British people, we get highly attuned to recognizing that thing. I was just in the supermarket and I was there with my girlfriend. I tried to talk to the cashier and she answered I know she speaks good English, and she answered my question quite abruptly. And I'm like, okay, that's a no. She's not going to say, I do not want to speak today, right? She's at work. She's kind of, in place. I just kind of felt like, okay, that abruptness is a little signaling for me here, right? Because you could also get hypersensitive to that. Like any little signal
Yeah.
means,
Yeah. And that's common, isn't it, in relationships of, oh, but you spoke to me a certain way and I just
yeah,
felt that, you know.
yeah. You're like, I thought you didn't like me, like this sort of mind reading stuff that people expect from others. Like, again, we can't expect mind reading, right? Like, we should be able
Yeah.
to, as adults, we are responsible for clearly expressing our boundaries. And what I'm amazed by, particularly, I think there is a gender difference here. Women think that a slight change in facial expression or tone is enough to clearly express a boundary. And I'm sorry, but we're way retarded this way. Like, we're not even understanding that that's a boundary. We're like, use your words, ladies, please. Just tell us, like, tell us clearly.
It also depends on the face.
Right. I have to pick up the face and I'm like looking at my phone, I'm busy and I missed that, like, was that a no or a no, try again, or a no, yes, but no, or a no, not right now? Because there's not just no. And this is the lie of like, no means no. I'm sorry, but it fucking doesn't. Sometimes no means no. Sometimes no means no, fuck off, don't ask again. Or sometimes no means you shouldn't have asked. Because actually there is a cost for people in saying no. And I remember like I was around the nonviolent communication community a lot, and they are big on the power of requests. And it's a really good learning to ask for what you want. But actually, what they don't appreciate is there is a cost for someone in saying no, even if they do it gracefully. No, thank you. It's like, thanks for the offer, but
Yeah.
no. Um, there is a cost for that in that it can take people energy. For some people, it's not easy
Yes.
to say no. So you can't just, I used to have a friend at university who would go to a nightclub and walk up to 50 girls and say, how about a shag? Right? And he'd say, well, I'm just asking, And I'd say, yeah, but there's still a cost for people in saying, he's like, I'm not forcing anyone, I'm just asking. And like, he was very good at being rejected, He was skilled in that. He just never took it personally. He was playing a numbers game, basically. And I said, yeah, but there's still a cost for those people in that. And this is tricky because we are responsible for our own emotions, right? Like, I don't know how someone's going to respond if I ask them out on a date or if I'm trying to sell them a course and I say, hey, do you want to come to our course? I don't know how they'll respond. So am I responsible for their feeling? I don't know. I think I can still be calibrated in that. Like, is my request likely to be well received, even if not accepted?
Yeah, it depends on
What
the
do you think? Where's the
relationship,
line there?
the relationship, the circumstances. Truthfully, in the 80s or 90s in the UK, that question in nightclubs would have been common, and so
Oh,
probably
really?
didn't have a
I never did nightclubs a lot. I just had there's one friend, Rob, who used to do this.
yeah,
So
probably didn't have a great cost. But that
if you're out there, Rob,
quest
I hope you're doing okay, and I hope you don't have AIDS. So,
but questions sometimes are received as, why have you put me in that position? Because that is hard for someone to then respond to with no.
I think I
So,
get now that it's harder for other people than me as someone that
yeah,
finds it quite easy to say no. And I think having a kid, what I'll do now is like say, like to coachees, for example, I say, you don't have to do this. It's no big deal. I give them what I call the honorable out.
yeah,
So the honorable out, and this is the key thing with no, is how do you reward or punish someone for saying no? Right? Like if I want my partner to have good boundaries, when she says no, I need to not only respect it, but actually encourage it. And this is tricky when we're not getting what I want, right? It's
yeah,
tricky to say, you know what, I really did want to go out for dinner, but I totally appreciate you don't. Thank you so much for being honest with me. I get you're tired. Let's just get takeaway. Like to actually reward the no. I actually distinctly remember the first time someone told me a graceful no. It was a teacher in California and I was studying with. And I'd said, hey, can we go to an Aikido class together? And they took me aside and said, Mark, I really appreciate why you asked me and you trusted me. And they really like acknowledged my need in the asking. And then they declined and they explained the reason why. And it was very clear. It wasn't like, oh, I can't do it. I'm sorry. Because often people say they can't do things that they fucking could, right? So we know that's
yes,
bullshit. When they say, oh, I can't do it. Like even kids know that's bullshit. When you say no to say, it's impossible, they say it is possible. You're choosing not to. That's okay. But I remember this note, and it was so beautiful. It actually built the relationship. And I walked away thinking, wow, I've never been said no to so gracefully. And another example, I remember asking this beautiful girl out once. Where was it? Bulgaria or something. She was like a model or something, right? And she stopped and she touched my face. She said, that's so brave that you would ask me out. And a lot of people don't ask me out because I am a model and they're scared to. And I just want to say, I respect you for being man enough to ask me out. She, it's quite East European. She said, well done. And I really hope you find someone. She said, I'm actually in a relationship right now and I'm not dating anyone else, but I just want to say, well done. And then she like not patronizingly, like tapped me on the shoulder. And I was like glowing afterwards. I was like, I am man, I am brave. She has thanked me for bravery. It only took her like 10 seconds. And obviously, she didn't owe me that. She wasn't obliged to do that. But I just remember thinking, God, that was graceful. And it's
yes.
quite rare, by the way, for a graceful decline. And you can say the reason why is because some people don't receive a no well and women are scared, blah, blah, blah. But when I had was like 15 years ago and it sticks with me. I remember where I was. I was in the main street of Sofia, Bulgaria when it happened. It was a beautiful moment. So the art of a graceful no.
And the art of a graceful no is also not over explaining as well. I can't do that because of this and this and this and this and this
Don't
and
make
this and
excuses.
this.
Just say no. Because
Oh,
people
no.
understand there's no excuses. Right?
Yeah.
And I've a couple of times I've said to people, I'm not going to do it because it's not my priority, but thank you for asking. And they're so appreciative that you're fucking honest with them about it. And it does come from the relationship. Like recently, a guy asked me for some stuff, and I didn't know him that well. I was like, dude, we've just met, right? We've just met. Or because I know a few kind of famous people in this field, sometimes I'll have friends say, oh, yeah, can you ask Ken Wilber this for me? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't have that relationship. I don't have that kind of social capital with him. It burns some social capital for me to ask one of these famous YouTubers or famous
Yeah.
teachers. Like if someone said to me the other day, can you ask Stephen Porges this? And I'm like, let me think about that because that's a big deal. Because I don't get to, he responds to my emails about trauma stuff from Ukraine, for example, but I don't get to ask him stuff all the time. That's not the relationship
No,
I have with him. It's collegiate, it's friendly, but it's not, he doesn't owe me that. I think that's understanding the relationship you have is kind of key to the calibration here, as well as a somatic
absolutely.
calibration, right? They're like just
Yeah.
looking at the embodiment.
Yeah. In fact, I said no to you recently. Are you and Rick coming out for dinner this
Oh,
evening
yeah.
in London?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I've got a date with pajamas and
And
takeout.
particularly
And
knowing about your past, how did I take it, Helen? And I was like, fuck you, Helen. And
no, you were not.
I was like, okay, cool, I get it. You've got fatigue stuff. You're with Rick. It's all good. Rick's Helen's partner for those listening. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how we take the no either builds or breaks the relationship, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting, like it's interesting this word pushy. Like, how many times do you get to ask? Like, nobody likes pushy sales, for example, right? And I think you can ask a couple of times, right? Or I had a friend and I said if a girl doesn't text you back, he was like, how many times can I text her before I take that as a no? And I was like, well, I'm not sure ghosting people is great communication, but I think it's super common now in professional contexts as well as I've had like ex-employees ghost me, not just in romantic context. Apparently, it's a really normal way of saying I no longer want a relationship with you is just to ignore someone.
Or you're in spam. And how do you know which it
Right.
is?
Or they've died, or they're not using
Yeah.
WhatsApp anymore. They've switched to Signal, or a million other reasons. They're just busy right now. Like a friend of mine I thought hated me. Turned out he just had a baby and he took 6 months off his phone. Right. And I was like, 6 months later, he comes back online. It's like, yeah, I would say to people out there, ghosting someone is not a good no.
No.
Right. I mean, and also people will make excuses, say, yeah, but once I didn't go someone, he was mean to me. I'm like, okay, send a message, then press block. He doesn't even have a chance to be mean to you. And also it's like, if there's people who I employed for 2 years, never abused, they left on good terms, I helped get them another job. I'm not going to name names, but it's like, that's just civil. Spend
Absolutely.
5 seconds texting me back. A no doesn't have to be today. I'll wait a week. It's fine. We're all busy. Again, it's tricky though. Like, where's that line? Do you owe someone that? It's their time after all, right? So maybe you can say they don't owe you that text.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there is a civility as well, isn't there? Managing relationships with civility and appropriate boundaries. There is a
Yeah, it's
combination
maybe
of,
that's the only thing we do owe each other is basic civility, right? Particularly if
yeah,
there's been past relationship or investment
yeah,
in that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so embodied skills, noticing it, learning it, having a scalability of no. Obviously, there's a lot of somatic practices that build no. I get people doing push-ups, chaturangas, bench presses. You'll see me on coaching demos on YouTube, like push people. Yeah, anything else on somatic practices? Because you've seen me do a lot of coaching over the years.
well, practicing the embodiment of it in a shop, in a supermarket, in a
Okay.
coffee shop. Do you want the extra large cappuccino?
Yeah, that's saying
No.
no to an upsell without apology.
Yes.
And the sequence matters, right? Like someone told me this thing the other day that if you want to say no to something, you don't say thank you first and then no, thank you, but no. You say no and thank you, and then they remember the thank you, right? It's like otherwise,
Yes.
everything you said before the but is just doesn't even count kind of thing. Or the no sorry. For some people, they need to learn to not apologize, right? Because again, no one has a right over your body or your time. So it's like, why would you apologize for that? And that's tricky.
Yeah.
Like I just walked past a homeless guy and he begged for me. It's the instinct is to say no, sorry, or to lie. I haven't got any money. It's pretty
Yes.
difficult to just say no.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the number of times that's happened, and it is really difficult to, but it needs practice. Noticing when I want to say sorry, but, and practicing that pause. No.
So much of embodiment training, I realize it's almost embarrassing. It comes down to stress management, Helen.
It
You know what
does.
I mean? Like so much embodiment training, but when I've gone, okay, it's a bit stressful saying no because we have some conditioning. So you send to yourself, take a breath, say no. And of course, you might need a coach to practice with. You might need to consider a partner who has been told to be nice to you when you say no and not be pushy, right? You might need a partner who is a bit pushy so you can practice. Like I do this with clients, like I get them saying no under pressure. Interestingly, I apply two kinds of pressure. One is bullying. So I bully my clients all the time, right? I deliberately, in a sort of, in a calibrated, consented way, I add pressure, I shout at them, I intimidate them. But the other thing I do is I beg. So the other thing that some clients struggle with way more than being bullied, being kind of, intimidated, right? Because trauma can come from that. So we have to be careful with the window of tolerance and the centering, of course. Always consent, always calibration. The other piece is like, please, or if you loved me, you would do it. My girlfriend and I joke about this all the time. I'm like, play Warhammer with me. If you love me, you would. And like we're deliberately like using these like kind of like classic manipulations, and the other one's like bugger off, like it's like yeah, the things people do to manipulate each other to get past and know. Did I ever tell this story about dating a psychopath? Ever tell you this story?
No.
Oh, I briefly dated a psychopathic lawyer, and she was very charming, very smart. We had a great date. I was promiscuous in those days. We went back to my house, had a great time. Then, but I felt like sort of cold sleeping next to her. Like she didn't have much empathy. And I kind of was in the nighttime feeling like, something was wrong here. I'm not sure if I want to see this person again. Like my bodily no was coming up. And then in the morning, I said, it was a really nice date, but she's like, let's have sex again. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm good. And as a man, this doesn't happen very often, right? Particularly when you're a young man. So you don't have much practice at it. And then what was fascinating is she cycled through about 8 different ways to try and get what she wanted.
Oh,
So she was like, please. I was like, no, I'm just not in the mood, but thank you. And then she'd say, if you were a real man, you would have sex with me. And then my last boyfriend, and she went through it, and she's like, all these different strategies of them, and it was so quick. I kind of realized what she was doing, and then I was creeped out, and I was like, you know what, this is not the person I want to date. But it was like, oh, but here's the thing. Now she was, I think, a genuine psychopath. And they're rare, and now I can spot them. Sometimes they're Instagram influencers and they have a particular field. When they come on the podcast, I notice them. I got better at spotting it, actually. I've been teaching my PA who gets guests on to spot it so we don't invite them on the podcast. It's a good skill to have, the narcissists and the psychos, because there's a sort of coldness with them. But here's the thing, we all do it. I don't know anyone who fully accepts a no. Everyone has their little strategies, even if it's being charming. It doesn't have to be like violent and abusive, right? What's yours, Helen? You're a good woman. You're a nice person. What's yours? What do you do when Rick says no to, whatever you want to do? And you're like, what do you do? What are your little tricks that kick in?
to be fair, Rick doesn't say no very often.
I'm sure there are some instances. It doesn't have to be in the romantic
No, no,
context.
no, no. To anything. But what would I do? I'd go, hey, that's okay.
So you sort of look a bit disappointed, sort of,
Yeah,
oh, he made you sad. He's responsible for your
yeah.
feelings. Okay. I mean, basically, people do whatever they worked when they were kids, right? Like, and you
Yeah.
see this. I did an exercise with a corporate group once. I say, right, grab a partner. You've got to get them across the room. And some people dragged their partners. Some people bribed their partners. Some people explained why it was necessary. Some people pleaded. And because I didn't really give them any explanation, I said, just get them across the room. And people just immediately went to all these strategies. And I'm like, okay, when did you learn that? And we tracked it back. And for
Mm,
most people, it was like how they got their brother or sister when they were 5 years old to play games with them or something. It's like really young patterns, really young. They just
yeah.
hadn't updated them.
Yeah, yeah. Well practiced over many decades. Yeah.
Well practiced. Okay, so we practice something different. We practice noticing what we want. We practice finding that embodiment. We practice the scalability and know. We role model on people. Like I'm, recounting the story of my teacher and then this beautiful girl in Bulgaria. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that was possible at one point, and now I'm like, can I be that person? Can I be the boss who says no in a way that's loving and kind, right? Like, can I do that? Um, Another one I've practiced with people is help them say a better yes. Because because most people are just passive, and once they realize that a yes can be active, right? And they might have to do some stuff around self-care, like realizing that no comes from love. We might have to do distinction coaching, loving no versus a hateful no. That's a good one, actually. If people think that no is always hateful and they're good people, they just won't ever do it. And it's sort of like,
Yeah.
well, I better say yes because that's the loving thing. So if you do make that distinction somatically for them between a loving and non-loving no, that can be helpful. Or you get them practicing yes, so they realize, oh, this is what yes feels like. And then passivity is distinct from that. They go, oh, this is not really a yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. I had to practice that loving no with my adult children to be able to carry it off because I
Right.
hadn't worked out the hateful versus loving.
Like sometimes I
Yeah.
get people to put their hand on their heart and say
Yeah.
no. We have a no pose. People can look up on YouTube, put up no pose. An attractive Ukrainian girl can teach you. So we have a no pose that we work with, but sometimes it's hand on the heart. And sometimes I get people to say no and I love you. Because
Yes.
just that breaks the conditioning of no is hateful, no is bad. And often it's the key thing is the loving no. Or I say no. And the example I give is if my niece, when she was younger, she would want me to read her a story, right? And if it was too late, my sister said, help get it to bed. Don't read her another story, Mark. It's not helpful now, right? I'd have to say, like, I would love to, and no. And I like, if I can find that for a child, it's like, okay, now what does that look like in a context of,
Yeah.
work, relationships? So, yeah,
Yeah.
there's some definitely key pieces. Practice in the shops with the upsells. Uh, People, by the way, are often shocked when they hear like how I handle a sales call. Like they think they've got a good no until someone tries to violate me. And then they see what I do and they're just like, wow, I could not do that. That's impressive. There's always like another level, whether it's more kind, like the woman in Bulgaria, whether it's more fierce, can they do a really fierce no so they feel really secure in their no? Sometimes it's even like learning self-defense skills. It's like learning to be safe in your no. Like, are you actually
Yes.
safe saying no? Right? Do you have to
Yes.
plead with people like a hostage?
Yes.
Yeah. Any
Yeah.
more on somatics of no? I think we've covered some of the main tools we use, distinction coaching,
Mm.
lots of centering, lots of encouragement, lots of love.
And we'll be going through quite a bit of this, won't we, in a
Oh,
lot
we've
more
got a whole
detail?
bunch. They're good
Yeah.
plug, Helen. I like what you did there. Okay, yeah. So we've got a whole bunch of sessions on different approaches to no. There's some fun titles to some of them actually Steve's put together. So have a look at that. It's on the embodimentunlimited.com. If you've missed that, I do coaching on this. Get in touch if you want coaching from me or from Helen. I've successfully coached a lot of people on this actually. And it's interesting, like sometimes I'll have people report back and I coached this Brazilian girl and she said, and I was on a date and I just told him no. And he stopped and it was amazing. And then we kissed. And then later on I said yes and I changed my mind and it was all fine. And I was like, great. Or the one I really like hearing is I said no to my mother. Because that's the high level. That's the ultimate. It's like my mother wanted to give me more food and I said, no, thank you, mother. I've had enough. And she respected it. It's like, that's how I know. I'm like, okay, 8 sessions are done. The coaching is over if you've done that level. So yeah,
Hardcore.
I really like it actually as a coach when I hear back and people tell me their little success stories. And sometimes they're celebrating just like the waiter wanted to upsell them some naan bread and they didn't want naan bread, and they said no. And this, I'm like, how is that? In my head, I'm going, this is a kind of a small thing, but for them, it's like a big deal.
Yeah.
And also, I just say to anyone out there, if you are struggling with no, I want to encourage you because you can't have real intimacy till you do this. Your time will not be yours. You won't like people often ask me, how do I get so much done? Like I've written, what is it, 7 books now, and this is podcast number 680 or something. And I'm like, yeah, because I say no really well. Like I say no to a lot of stuff. This is
Yeah.
how I take care of my health. This is how, like how I take care of my business. This is just so essential for life, isn't it? So I just want to, if anyone out there is like finding it difficult. You might not be talented with no like me. You might have like the nice English lady conditioning that Helen's had. Anything you want to say to the nice ladies out there who may have had a tough time with it?
Yeah, yeah. Don't berate yourself for your patterns that have served you well in the past. You can still learn new ones and find the balance that serves you better.
Yeah, little, what do you call? I call them baby steps. You call them fairy steps, right? Because they
That's
little
right.
by little you start to
Teeny
get a
ones.
better know. And people sometimes say, "Oh, I understand cognitively, but I can't do it." Okay, that's where the embodied practice comes in. That's where the time comes in. So, yeah. So practice with us online if you want to do that. People pleasing book is out there. One-to-one coaching. Me or Helen, get in touch if you want that. But Helen, I've got to say no to more of your time because my friend Ava's coming around for lunch.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.